We'll be breaking out the sewing machine to build a shop apron today on My Favorite Things. This is not the first sewing project I've done. I learned to sew as a kid, and I've done a few things over the years when I needed to. But 2020 kind of gave me the time and the motivation to really learn some more about sewing. 2020 also provided the opportunity for me to plan some backpacking trips with some friends and some family. So my first big project was a backpack. I made a roll top backpacking backpack. Back in November, I had COVID, and after the first couple of days, my symptoms were not much to speak of, so I had about 10 days where I had time and I had energy, felt good enough to go ahead and do a project like that. It took about 10 days of sewing, and I missed a few things. I'd do the adjustment straps a little bit differently if I were to build another one, but that was my first one. It was a downloaded pattern that I printed out and followed pretty closely. And I've taken this backpack on at least one overnight trip, and it functioned very well for the miles that we traveled during that trip. Well, recently I watched Adam Savage build his shop apron and thought, there is my next project. Again, I downloaded a pattern, but this time I scrapped it, opting instead to kind of freehand this one. This drawing gives the gist of the intent, but a couple of the measurements changed as I made it. The bottom pocket turned out to be 19 inches across instead of the 10 that you'll see here in just a moment, and it turned out to be about 8 inches deep. I'm using waxed canvas for this project. I found a returned tarp on Amazon Warehouse that should let me make several projects. It's big enough. Making measurements to get the general layout happened first. It would be hard to match this curve, one side to another, so folding it hot dog style and cutting to match seemed to be the best practice. Pockets on the front are a necessity for a shop apron. Laying them out in another color gives the project a little pop. One will be for pins or screwdrivers and the other for wider utensils. There are a lot of really good sewing channels on YouTube. The Jason of All Trades is my favorite. I'm running a 3/8 inch seam allowance for most of this. The pockets have a 1/4 inch. I snipped the corners of the pockets so they wouldn't be so thick when making the turns. These plastic clips are great help when getting the seam ready. They slip off easily and they hold well. When you start sewing, you have to be sure and lock in your stitches by reversing once as you start and finish a side. Where the fabric gets thick, sometimes I'll reverse and roll by hand so as not to endanger breaking that needle. When I cut the pieces out of this tarp, I didn't cut the edge for most of it. So I was able to take the rolled edge that had been pre-hemmed and rip the seam out, and then use that scrap as my straps for the apron. My plan was to do a cross back and then attach at the hip. And I know that means it's permanently attached. There's nothing to tie, so I'll have to slip it over my head in order to put it on. But I like that better than having to tie and untie every time. The bottom pocket is the last piece of the apron to be attached. I'm really pleased with the way it turned out. There's just something satisfying about starting and finishing a project, especially one that promises to be as useful as this one.